November 24, year 885. 700 Viking ships on the Seine. 10,000 warriors who've already burned half of Francia. Defending Paris. 200 soldiers behind walls older than Christ. The odds? 50 to 1. The commander? A 60-year-old bishop who kills with a bow, plants a cross on the ramparts every dawn, and has never surrendered in his life. 11 months of hell begins now. By the time it ends, France will be born in Viking blood. The Viking chieftain Siegfried rose to the city walls on November 25 with a simple offer. Open the bridges, let the fleet sail upstream to Burgundy, and Paris lives. Bishop Gozlin refuses. His exact words, recorded by a monk who watches from the ramparts: "I hold this city for the emperor. You'll take it over my corpse." Siegfried smiles. That can be arranged. Dawn, November 26. The assault begins. The Vikings roll forward, 3 massive catapults, looted siege engines from their campaigns in the Low Countries, and start hammering the Grand Châtelet, the stone tower guarding the North Bridge. The tower is still under construction, half finished, held together with timber scaffolding and desperate prayer. Each boulder that hits sends dust raining from the ceiling inside, and the defenders can feel the impacts in their teeth. Boom. The northeast corner cracks. Boom. Stone chips fly like shrapnel. Boom. A wooden support beam snaps with a sound like breaking bone. While the catapults suppress the ramparts, Viking infantry rushes the base of the tower with picks and axes, trying to undermine the foundation. They're professionals. This is siege warfare 101. Knock down the tower, breach the bridge, sail past the city. The Franks have a different plan. From the tower's summit, defenders pour a mixture of boiling wax, pitch, and oil onto the attackers below. The smell hits first tar and death, sweet and cloying. Then, the screaming starts. Orm, a Viking raider from Norway, 32 years old, veteran of a dozen summer raids. The wax hits him square in the face. For 2 seconds, nothing. Then his beard catches fire. Then his hair. The burns are devastating his skin, blisters and peels as the wax hardens. He falls 10 meters from the siege ladder, hits the ground still burning, and dies trying to claw the wax from his face. His brothers watch. They keep climbing anyway. Bishop Gozlin appears on the ramparts, clearly visible in his robes, a cross hanging from his neck. He's holding a bow. A Viking shield-bearer makes the mistake of looking up. Gozlin's arrow takes him in the throat at 40 meters clean shot. The man drops without a sound. By sunset, the Grand Châtelet is a ruin. The northeast wall is half collapsed. The wooden supports are charred, and the Vikings have pulled back to regroup. They'll finish the job tomorrow. The tower cannot possibly survive another day. But that night, something happens that the monk Abbo will later call a miracle. Count Odo, 25 years old, future king of France, currently just a desperate defender, mobilizes every living person in the city. Men, women, clergy, children. They work through the darkness, rebuilding the tower with timber, adding reinforcements, constructing an entire new story on top of the damaged structure. When the sun rises on November 27, the Vikings stare in disbelief. The tower is taller than before, stronger. Gozlin plants his cross at the new summit. The Vikings realize this isn't going to be a quick raid. Siegfried orders his army to dig in. They begin constructing a fortified camp on the right bank, looting stone from the suburban churches to build their own walls. The siege has officially begun. To understand why 10,000 Vikings spend 11 months trying to crack one tiny fortress, you need to see Paris the way they see it. Not as a city, but as a cork in a bottle. The year is 885, and Paris isn't the sprawling metropolis you know today. It's a fortress confined entirely to the Ile de la Cité, a small island in the middle of the Seine River. Think of it as a stone ship anchored in the current, and the Vikings need to sail past it to reach the real prize, Burgundy, the rich heartland of Francia. fat with monasteries and undefended farms, just begging to be raided. But they can't sail past. 2 bridges connect the island to the mainland. The Grand Pont to the north, a stone bridge guarded by the Grand Châtelet Tower, the one the Vikings just failed to demolish. The Petit Pont to the south, a wooden bridge guarded by a smaller wooden tower called the Petit Châtelet. These bridges aren't decorative. They're booms stretched across a river highway, physically blocking 700 longships from sailing upstream. The walls themselves are Roman-built in the late Empire, from stone, cannibalized from pagan temples and public buildings. They're roughly 2 meters thick at the base, ancient but functional. Inside these walls, 200 professional soldiers, maybe 1,000 total fighters if you count the militia and clergy who know which end of a spear to hold. The strategic math is brutal. The Vikings outnumber the defenders 10 to 1, maybe 20 to 1 depending on who's counting. They have siege engines, professional warriors, and unlimited patience. The Franks have walls, 2 bridges, and Bishop Gozlin's refusal to negotiate. This fortress exists because of a decision made 21 years earlier. In year 864, King Charles the Bald, watching Vikings sail hundreds of miles inland with impunity, issued the Edict of Petrus. The law mandated the construction of fortified bridges at key river junctions to block Viking fleets. Paris is the linchpin of this strategy, the single most important fortress in West Francia. If Paris falls, the Seine is wide open. Vikings can sail to Burgundy, to Champagne, to the heart of the Frankish kingdom. They can winter in fortified camps, demand tribute from entire provinces, and carve out territories the way they've already done in England. But if Paris holds, the Vikings are stuck. They're camped outside a fortress they can't bypass, bleeding warriors to disease and hunger, while the autumn rains turn their camp into a freezing mud pit. The Vikings understand the situation perfectly. So does Bishop Gozlin. This isn't just a siege. It's a test of wills, the irresistible force of Viking expansion versus the immovable object of Frankish fortification. The bridges must break, or the Vikings must leave. Siegfried isn't planning to leave. He's already lost men to Gozlin's boiling wax and the old bishop's terrifyingly accurate archery. This has become personal. He starts building battering rams. Bishop Gozlin is 60 years old, which in the 9th century makes him ancient. Most men are dead by 50 if war or disease doesn't take them first. He has the weathered face of someone who's spent decades fasting and praying, but his hands tell a different story. Calluses from bowstrings, scars on his knuckles from close combat. He's not like other bishops. Most prelates would never touch a weapon. It's technically forbidden by church law for clergy to shed blood. Gozlin doesn't care about technicalities. He wields a bow in his right hand and an axe in his left, and every morning before the fighting starts, he climbs to the highest point of the ramparts and plants a wooden cross where every Viking in the camp can see it. It's psychological warfare. The cross says, "God is watching. I am his instrument. You will die here." The Vikings call him something in Norse that roughly translates to the priest who kills. His own men call him father and mean it in every sense, spiritual leader, military commander, and the one who will personally execute anyone caught spreading defeatist talk. When Gozlin says, "The walls will hold," the walls hold. When he says a man will fight until his last breath, that man fights or faces something worse than Viking axes. His reputation is earned. During one assault, a Viking chieftain makes the mistake of standing too long in the open, shouting orders to his men. Gozlin's arrow finds him at 40 meters, enters under the chin. The shot is fatal. The chieftain drops mid-sentence. His warriors scatter. Count Odo is the other half of the defense. He's 25, the eldest son of Robert the Strong, and he's been training for war since he could hold a sword. Where Gozlin is the spiritual anchor, Odo is the blade. He fights in the front rank during every assault, never behind his men, never giving an order he wouldn't execute himself. His personal charisma, his magnetic men follow him because he radiates absolute certainty that Paris will never fall. But there's a coldness to Odo that unsettles even his own soldiers. When a militiaman suggests opening negotiations with Siegfried, Maybe paying a small tribute to avoid more bloodshed, Odo has the man executed immediately in front of the garrison. The body is displayed on the walls for 3 days. The message is clear: no surrender. Not now, not ever. The third defender worth mentioning is Iblis, the abbot of Saint Germain. He's turned his monastery into an archery academy. The monk Abbo claims Ebels could kill 7 Danes with a single arrow, which is poetic exaggeration. But the core truth is this: Ebels is terrifyingly accurate. He targets Viking leaders specifically, forcing them to stay behind their shield walls or risk a shaft through the throat. The Vikings learn quickly to avoid his section of the ramparts. These 3 men, a 60-year-old bishop who plants crosses before battles, a 25-year-old count who executes defeatists, and an abbot who's memorized the firing art to every corner of the Viking camp, are what stand between Siegfried's army and the richest lands in Francia. Siegfried studies them from across the river and makes a decision. If the defenders won't negotiate, he'll bury them under superior engineering and sheer numbers. The Vikings aren't raiders anymore. They're a siege army. Over the winter months, they construct weapons that would make Roman engineers jealous. Massive battering rams, 16 wheels per ram, housed under heavy oak roofs to protect the operators from arrows and stones. The wheels are grouped in 3s for stability, and when these monsters roll forward, the ground shakes. The defenders can hear them coming from 100 meters away, a deep, grinding sound, like the earth itself is groaning. They build catapults, not the crude rock throwers of earlier raids, but actual military-grade ballistae, capable of punching through stone. Abbo's chronicle mentions 1,000 grenades, likely lead sling bullets or clay pots filled with incendiary materials raining down on the city throughout the winter. And they dig. Mining operations begin in December, Vikings tunneling under the city walls, while Frankish defenders dig countermines to intercept them. Underground, in total darkness, men fight with knives and picks. No room for swords or shields, just close-quarters butchery in mud and stone. The bodies are left in the tunnels because retrieving them is too dangerous. The Frankish defense relies on one simple principle: make every Viking assault cost more than Siegfried is willing to pay. The hot wax and pitch mixture, what Abbo calls the hair treatment, becomes their signature weapon. It's simple chemistry: beeswax, pine pitch, and oil, heated until it's just below boiling, then poured from the ramparts onto anyone climbing siege ladders. The wax doesn't just burn, it sticks. It hardens as it cools, creating a shell that traps heat against the skin. The burns are devastating, and there's no way to remove the wax quickly enough to matter. But the Vikings adapt. They start wearing thick woolen cloaks soaked in water, which provides some protection. They build longer ladders that can reach the ramparts faster, reducing exposure time. They coordinate their assaults, hitting multiple points simultaneously to spread the defenders thin. The numerical advantage is crushing. The Vikings can lose 50 men in an assault and absorb it. The Franks lose 5 defenders and it's a crisis. By January, the professional soldiers are exhausted. The militia is terrified. Food supplies are running dangerously low, and then the psychological warfare begins. The Vikings practice flighting ritualized combat taunting designed to provoke and demoralize. Viking warriors stand just outside arrow range and shout insults about Frankish manhood. Their reliance on walls instead of open battle, they're cowering behind a priest's robes. Worse, Viking women participate camp followers and shield maidens who mock the Frankish defenders for hiding, while real warriors stand in the open. Gozlin responds by increasing the archery volleys. His message is simple: talk gets you killed. But the real pressure isn't military, it's biological. Inside the walls, starvation sets in. Refugees from the surrounding countryside have flooded into Paris, and now there are too many mouths to feed. By February, people are boiling leather belts to make broth the taste is somewhere between shoe polish and despair. Disease follows hunger. Dysentery spreads through the overcrowded quarters. Then typhus. The defenders are dying of illness faster than Viking arrows. In the Viking camp, conditions aren't much better. The winter rains turn their fortified camp into a freezing mud pit. Dysentery spreads there too. Warriors who survive dozens of raids die shivering in their tents, unable to keep food down, unable to stand. Disease doesn't care about courage or skill. This isn't a siege anymore. It's a contest to see which side runs out of living men first. December, year 885. The Vikings unveil their masterpiece of siege engineering. 3 battering rams, each one a mobile fortress on wheels. The lead ram is 8 meters long, tipped with iron shaped like a wolf's head. Pure psychological warfare. The oak housing is thick enough to stop arrows and stones. It takes 40 men to operate each ram, 20 pushing, 10 protecting the sides with shields, 10 ready to rotate in when the first shift collapses from exhaustion. The target is the Grand Châtelet, the stone tower that guards the North Bridge. The same tower the Franks miraculously rebuilt after the November assault. The Vikings have learned from that failure. This time, they're not rushing, they're grinding. The rams roll forward at dawn, moving slowly across the frozen ground. From the ramparts, the Franks watch them come 3 massive shapes emerging from the morning fog like siege monsters from a nightmare. Boom. The first impact shakes dust from the tower ceiling. Boom. The second impact cracks mortar between stones. Boom. The rhythm becomes constant. Boom, boom, boom. A mechanical heartbeat that doesn't stop for hours. Inside the tower, Hugh, a 2-year-old baker's son who joined the militia 3 months ago, discovers that prolonged exposure to battering ram impacts does something to your body. His teeth rattle loose in his jaw. His vision blurs. He vomits from the vibration alone. By the 3rd hour, he's bleeding from his nose and ears. By the 5th hour, he's dead, internal injuries from the constant shaking. His body is carried down and laid with the others. The Franks are losing men without the Vikings ever reaching the walls. But Gozlin has a plan. If the Vikings want to use siege engines, he'll burn them. December 18, year 885. Night falls. Count Odo selects 30 volunteers, the craziest, most reckless fighters in the garrison. Their mission is simple: sneak out of the city, cross the frozen ground, and set fire to the nearest battering ram. Odo leads them personally. They blacken their faces with soot, wrap their swords in cloth to prevent noise, and slip out through a small postern gate on the island's north side. The Viking camp is 200 meters away. Watchfires burn every 50 meters. Sentries patrol in pairs. The Franks crawl through the darkness, moving between the frozen mud ridges left by Viking siege equipment. It takes an hour to cover 200 meters. When they reach the rams sitting unguarded outside the main camp, too heavy to pull inside the fortifications every night, Odo's men pile pitch-soaked straw underneath the oak housing. Then someone drops a torch. The ram goes up like a funeral pyre, massive, ancient oak burning with orange flames that light up half the battlefield. The Vikings pour out of their camp, shouting, trying to extinguish the blaze, but it's too late. The housing collapses. The iron ram head melts into slag. Odo and his 30 fighters sprint back toward the city, while Vikings chase them through the darkness. 3 Franks don't make it cut down by arrows or tripped in the frozen mud. The other 27 make it inside the gates just as the sun rises. 1 ram destroyed, 2 remaining. The Vikings bring the other 2 forward the next morning, and the grinding resumes. Boom, boom, boom. The northeast corner of the Grand Châtelet develops a crack that spreads like lightning across the stone. By sunset, everyone knows the tower will fall within days. Then, the weather changes everything. January, year 886. The Seine freezes solid for the first time in 20 years. Inside Paris, the temperature inside buildings drops below freezing. People wake up with frost on their blankets. Children die in their sleep from cold. The food situation becomes catastrophic. The initial supplies are gone, the surrounding farms have been burned by Vikings, and nothing can be brought in by boat because the river is ice. Starvation drives people to unthinkable acts. The guards look the other way. understanding that hunger destroys humanity in ways that swords never could. Neighbors help each other where they can, but every week there are fewer neighbors to help. Marie, a 3-4-year-old baker's wife, loses her husband to plague in January. Her 2 youngest children die days later. She buries them in her cellar because the cemetery is full of frozen earth, impossible to dig. By February, she's boiling leather scraps to make broth for her surviving daughter, age 6. Disease claims Marie too. Plague takes her in the night. Her daughter is taken in by an elderly monk from Saint-Germain. The girl will survive the siege and live to old age, but she'll never speak of her mother again. The city physician, Jean de Tours, keeps a ledger of deaths. December 15, 12 dead, mostly plague. December 20, 31 dead plague spreading. December 28, 54 dead starvation begins. January 5, 89 dead dysentery joins plague. January 10, the numbers become too overwhelming to track. Jean dies on January 12. The ledger's still in his possession. A grim record of the siege's toll. Across the river, the Viking camp isn't doing much better. Dysentery spreads through the tents like wildfire. Bjorn, a 2-year-old warrior from Denmark, father of 6, veteran of 30 summer raids, dies from the illness after 3 brutal days. His comrades burn his body immediately to stop the disease from spreading further. It doesn't work. By week's end, 200 Vikings have died from disease. Not from Frankish swords, from sickness and poor conditions. The underground warfare continues. In the tunnels beneath the city walls, men fight in total darkness with knives and rocks. A Frankish miner named Bernard, 38, encounters a Viking tunneler in a space so narrow neither man can swing properly. They grapple for 30 seconds before Bernard gets his knife into the Viking's ribs. The Viking dies in the dark, his body left where it falls because retrieving it means risking another ambush. Above ground, the psychological warfare intensifies. The Vikings know the Franks are starving, so they roast meat within sight of the walls, the smell of cooking pork and beef drifting across the frozen river like torture. They eat visibly, ostentatiously, making sure the defenders can see their full bellies. Gozlin responds by having his archers target anyone who gets too comfortable during meals. 3 Vikings die with food still in their mouths. And then, on April 16, year 886, the defense suffers its most devastating loss. Bishop Gozlin dies of plague. He's been fighting the illness for a week, refusing to leave the walls even as fever ravages him. On the morning of April 16, he climbs to his usual position on the ramparts, plants his cross one final time, and collapses. He dies with the cross still in his hand, his bow at his side. The morale impact is catastrophic. Gozlin wasn't just a commander, he was the soul of the defense, the living embodiment of the belief that Paris would never fall. With him gone, whispers of surrender begin circulating among the starving garrison. Count Odo faces a choice. Let the city collapse into defeatism, or do something so bold it reminds everyone why they're still fighting. He chooses bold. On the night of April 20, Odo slips out of the city, possibly swimming the freezing Seine, possibly using a small boat under cover of darkness. His mission: reach Emperor Charles the Fat, who's been conspicuously absent throughout this entire siege, and beg for relief. It's a suicide mission. The Vikings have sentries everywhere. If they catch Odo, they'll parade his head on a pike. But Odo makes it through. He reaches the Emperor's court, delivers a desperate plea for help, and then incredibly fights his way back into Paris to tell the garrison that help is coming. The news electrifies the defenders. The Emperor himself is gathering an army. Relief is on the way. They just have to hold a little longer. They don't know yet that the Emperor's help will be the worst betrayal of all. February 6, year 886. Before Gozlin's death, before Odo's escape, the moment that defines the entire siege. The Vikings have been studying the petit pont, the wooden bridge on the south side of the island, for months. Stone bridges are nearly impossible to destroy, but wooden bridges burn. They try fire ships first. 3 Viking longships lash together, filled with dry wood, pitch, and animal carcasses for extra fuel. They set them ablaze and release them upstream, letting the current carry them down into the bridge supports. The Franks see them coming. Defenders with long poles push the burning ships away from the bridge, extinguishing the fires before they can spread. It almost works. But the bridge supports are charred, weakened. The wooden piles that hold the bridge above the waterline are now half burned, and everyone knows the next storm will finish what the Vikings started. February 6. Heavy winter rains. The Seine rises 2 meters in 12 hours, swollen with runoff from the surrounding countryside. The current becomes a battering ram of its own, carrying debris, ice chunks, and the wreckage of Viking supply barges that broke loose upstream. The sound changes first. The rhythmic T-H-U-D, T-H-U-D, T-H-U-D of debris hitting the bridge support stops. 3 seconds of silence. Everyone on both sides holds their breath. Then, a crack like thunder splitting the sky. The petit pont collapses. The wooden supports give way. The bridge deck tilts, and the entire structure slides into the river in a groaning avalanche of timber and stone. The noise echoes across the battlefield, a grinding roar that sounds like the world breaking. The collapse leaves the Petit Châtelet, the wooden tower that guarded the south end of the bridge, completely isolated on the left bank, cut off from the city, cut off from reinforcements. Inside the tower, 12 Frankish defenders. Just 12. The Vikings surround the tower within minutes, hundreds of warriors forming a circle of shields and spears. Sigfrid himself comes forward to offer terms. Surrender. Lay down your weapons. You'll be ransomed back to Paris. Standard siege protocol. The 12 defenders refuse. Their captain is Bertrand, 45 years old, a professional soldier who's been fighting Vikings since he was 20. Missing 3 fingers on his left hand from an old wound, limps from an axe that shattered his knee at the Battle of Saucourt. He's survived 25 years of this war, and he's not surrendering now. The Vikings attack. Pierre, 19, a blacksmith's apprentice with arms like oak branches from years at the forge, fights from the tower's entrance. He kills 2 Vikings with a broken spear, drives it through mail and into ribs. A Viking sword finds him. The wound is fatal. He makes it 3 steps backward before falling. His cousin, fighting beside him, freezes at the sight. A moment's hesitation, a Viking axe ends him too. The assault continues for an hour. The 12 defenders hold the tower's narrow entrance, where numbers don't matter as much. They make the Vikings pay for every step. Bodies pile up in the doorway. But the Vikings have unlimited men. The 12 do not. By sunset, Bertrand is the last one standing. He fights alone for 2 minutes, an eternity in close combat, before exhaustion drops him to his knees. The Vikings finish him quickly. 11 Viking bodies surround him when he falls. The Vikings pile hay and wood against the tower, but there's no one left to burn out. The 12 died fighting to the last man, exactly the way Gozlin said they would. The Vikings cut off their heads and mount them on pikes facing the city walls. 12 heads, eyes still open. Blood freezing in the winter air. The Parisians watch from across the river. Horror, grief, and then something else. Rage. If 12 men can hold for that long against hundreds, Paris can hold forever. April, year 886. Sigfrid takes 60 pounds of silver from the abbot of Saint Denis and leaves. A businessman cutting his losses. The rest of the Viking army stays. Count Odo slips out of the city on the night of April 20, swimming the Seine or using a boat under fog. The chroniclers never agree and reaches Emperor Charles the Fat. He begs for relief. Charles promises an army. Odo fights his way back into Paris with news. Help is coming. October, year 886. The Imperial Army arrives at Montmartre. Massive, professional. The Vikings are trapped between Paris and the Emperor's host. This should be a massacre. Charles negotiates instead. He pays the Vikings 700 pounds of silver, more than 10 times what bought Sigfrid's departure. Worse, he He grants them passage to Burgundy, using them as a weapon against his own rebellious subjects. Duke Henry of Saxony, sent to probe Viking defenses, falls into a wolf pit and dies in the mud before the treaty even takes effect. The imperial army leaves without drawing swords. Count Odo refuses to honor the treaty. The bridges stay closed. When the Vikings try to sail past, the Parisians deny them passage. Not after 11 months. Not after everything. The Vikings drag their ships overland, 700 longships hauled on log rollers around the city, while the defenders watch in exhausted silence. The siege ends with keels grinding across French soil. Emperor Charles the Fat is deposed in year 887, dies shortly after, unmourned. The unified Carolingian Empire dies with him. The West Frankish nobles elect Count Odo as king of the Franks in year 888, not because of bloodline, because he held Paris when the emperor fled. This begins the Robertian dynasty, which eventually produces Hugh Capet. The Capetian line rules France for 800 years. Every French king from 987 to 1792 traces legitimacy back to the young count who rebuilt a tower overnight. For the Vikings, the lesson is clear. Frankish kings will pay extraordinary sums to avoid fighting. In year 911, Charles the Simple grants Rollo the entire territory of Normandy in exchange for converting to Christianity and defending the Seine. The raiders become Norman dukes. Within 2 generations, they conquer England. Bishop Gozlin never sees any of this. He dies, believing he defended a city for an emperor who abandoned him. His tomb becomes a shrine. The 12 defenders of the Petit Châtelet have no tomb. Their bodies were dumped in the Seine, but their names survive in Abbo's chronicle. The Vikings wanted passage. They got it, but only after dragging ships on land. The emperor wanted peace. He got it, but lost his throne. The defenders wanted relief. They held, but relief was betrayal. Paris wanted to survive. It did. Barely, at a cost measured in corpses and ashes and 12 men who chose fire over surrender. The Seine flows on, indifferent to dynasties that rise and fall on its banks. But for 11 months, in year 885 and 886, the river was blocked by 2 bridges and a handful of people who decided that some things are worth dying for. History remembers them. The island remembers. The Ile de la Cité remembers. It was here that France learned to say no.